Okay, class, let's get started. This is lecture number 17, and I will tell you the next time we get together, you'll have your second examination. Now, the material on today's lecture will not be on that exam. It will be on your third examination. Let's go ahead and have a quick review here, my friends, and then I'm going to have a review later in the class period available for you for your second examination. But the last time we were together, talked about nation building, radical groups from within. And we're not through with those radical groups, by the way, but we are for today anyway. And we talked about Germany for a little bit. I mentioned to you about the Kaiser Wilhelm I, and he'll be followed by the Kaiser Wilhelm II, his grandson, by the way, who is no match for William I, Wilhelm I. And in fact, for William II, Wilhelm II, he actually dismissed Otto von Bismarck, if you can imagine that. We went into France for a while here. I mentioned to you about that affair, which is called the Dreyfus Affair. France had this wave of anti-Semitism that spread through it. And of course, that was a bogus affair with Alfred Dreyfus. We also talked about women's suffrage. You got familiar with Emmeline Pankhurst, Millicent Fawcett. And one I'm going to test you on here, folks, is Emily Davison, who martyred herself for her cause in a 1913 Epsom Derby. And we went into Russia, mentioned to you about some of the czars there, the Tsar Liberator, Alexander II, the Peacemaker, Alexander III, and of course Alexander II, by the way, was assassinated, as I told you about that. And we went into Nikolai II. We're not through with Nikolai II, but we are for the time being. But next time we get together after your examination, we'll spend a little bit of time with Nikolai II. And let's see what else we mentioned there about Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. And today we recognize him as Lenin. All right, and more on him at a later time. And in 1905, January 22nd, Bloody Sunday, 200,000 protesters protested in the plaza area, in the central gathering area, if you will, at St. Petersburg behind the Winter Palace. All right, so today we're going to go into World War I, and it will require us a couple of lectures to get through this. I've got a lot of visuals for you good folks today, so be patient with me. I'll try to drop every one of them for you, and you get a good laugh about that if you wish to do so. But anyway, this is World War I, the war to end all wars, the war to make the world great for democracy, safe for democracy. Many people just refer to it as the Great War. All right, and what it's going to do here, folks, it's going to give us a timeout period of about 20 years before we have a war that's even going to be 4 times more devastating than World War I, and that's going to be absolutely incredibly unbelievable with that. So let's go to our camera here, and let's see what we have here. The Great War here, I gave you those little phrases a second ago. There we go. I'm not going to repeat those, so you got that down. And to fully understand World War I and the beginnings of World War I, we have to have an understanding of international diplomacy that took place from 1870 to 1914. And at that time, no nation completely dominated all the other nations. All of these nations, in Europe anyway, were virtually equal, pretty much equal. And we also have to recognize that there were a lot of international rivalries that were taking place during this period of time. Countries were seeking out new sources of trade, nations where they could trade with anyway. New alliances would form here. We'll go through those in just a second here. I just made that statement to you. No single nation dominated all others. Some of these alliances will form during that period of time. And the first of these alliances, in fact, I'll just show you both of these alliances, and you need to recognize both of these. But this first one is referred to as the Triple Entente. Sometimes it's referred to as the Allied Powers. I prefer that you call it the Triple Entente, and it's made up of Great Britain and France and Russia. And the second one is referred to as the Triple Alliance. Sometimes you'll see this as the Central Powers, and this would, at least before the war, would consist of Germany and Italy and Austro-Hungary. Germany, Italy, and Austro-Hungary. So I'm going to go to the map behind me, and let's just spend a second here and try to identify those places here. And let me get out of your way. But if we look at the Triple Entente would include France over here, Great Britain, which is present over here. Notice all of this is in green, and then we have Russia, which is over here. And if we look at the Triple Alliance is in pink, and it will consist of Germany, the Austria-Hungary Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it also consists of Italy. Now, when the war breaks out, Italy, surprisingly, will join this side over here, it would join France and England. So that's why it's painted green in here. And we'll find that the Ottoman Empire over here, which is Turkey, the Ottoman Empire will join up with Austria-Hungary and join up with Germany. And I don't know why my chair is squeaking here, my friends. I guess I'm going to have to put some WD-40 on that. So those are the two principal sides, and you need to recognize those. All right, so let's move on here before we actually get into World War I. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other causative factors here. Nationalism, and particularly that Pan-Slavism. I hope by now you recognize what nationalism is. You know, it's to feel an emotion about a country or a cause, if you will. And as a part of this, Serbia, which is a Slavic country, Serbia wanted Bosnia and Herzegovina. They also wanted Croatia, Slovenia, Albania. That is the Balkans that we have today here. And just a quick glance back at the map behind me so I can show you where those countries are located. And those are the countries that are present right in this area, right through here. Okay, so back we go here, my friends. But indeed, Austria-Hungary, I failed to mention this a few seconds ago, Austria-Hungary actually annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina right out from under the noses of Serbia. Now, there's more on that in just a few minutes as we get into the Balkans War, but I'm not ready for that. Now, for nationalism, this also included, and you'll find this in many of the European cities of that time, you still have it as a matter of fact, where these nationalist leaders will remodel the cities. They create these broad, wide avenues. Napoleon III, I told you about that in an earlier time, you know, he was a nationalist. This will allow for military parades to take place, and during the military parades, the flags of the country will be proudly waved. The national anthems will be sung by the people that are marching through the streets there. Veterans from Franco-Prussian War will march in their uniforms. Monuments are erected to these veterans from that hometown, or monuments to the home units itself. Here's an example here. I took this in Kelm, Germany a few years ago, and this is a monument to World War I German soldiers from that city of Kelm. It's kind of like what you see in some of the southern cities where we still have monuments today of the Civil War, particularly in the southern towns, of course, here. So that's nationalism. In addition to that, we're going to see an increase in militarism. Armies will increase magnificently in size. Just for these tiny countries here of Serbia and Romania, I think I'm tiny anyway, they will grow armies, raise armies of 400,000. Russia will have an army of 2 million individuals. 2 million individuals. So that's what I'm talking about with militarism. So on we go here. And we need to address another war, which is going to precede World War I, and most people don't even recognize this war. Now, remember what we said, Pan-Slavism, all Slavs come together. And in a rather unknown war, and it's actually two wars, I wrote it as one, but it's actually the First Balkans War and the Second Balkans War, in 1912 and 1913. It will take place in the Balkans, and here's what's going to take place here. And it's going to involve what is known as the Balkan League. The Balkan League consists of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece. And for the Balkan League, they had their designs of Macedonia, on Macedonia. Now, Macedonia, that was part of the Ottoman Empire. Macedonia is part of the Ottoman Empire. It's right above Greece. I don't want to go back to my map right at this second anyway. And as it turned out, the Balkan League, Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece will invade Macedonia, and the Turks will react. And for the Turks, as I told you the other day, this is a sick man of Europe. This is a sick man of Europe, and this Ottoman Empire is literally crumbling at this point. So here's what's going to take place here, folks. And during the war, Serbia had been promised Albania, that also been promised a part of Macedonia. But at the peace accord, which much of the presence there was that of Austria-Hungary, Albania, crazily enough, gained its independence, and Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I will tell you right now, for Serbia, that is the last straw. All right, so let's go back to my camera here. Let me kind of tie things up here and show you where we've been talking about. All right, now, this area right here, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's Bosnia and Herzegovina. Here's Serbia here. Albania is present here. Macedonia is down in this region. It's not shown on the map, but it's down in this region right through here. All right, and so the discourse that's going to take place is when Austria-Hungary lays claim to Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is present there. And Serbia actually thought that it belonged to them. So back we go to the camera here, and we will move on. All right, so let's get into actually World War I itself. And I'll give you some of the casualty figures. World War I resulted in 37 million casualties. Can you believe that? 37 million casualties. Not all of those are combat deaths, but much of that's just civilian injuries and so forth with that. For the military itself, we had 9 million soldiers that were killed in combat. A few other notes I just gleaned from various sources. We had 74 million soldiers that were mobilized for all the countries in Europe, to include the United States here. And for 1,500 consecutive days, there were 6,000 combat deaths. Can you believe that? 1,500 consecutive days, 6,000 combat deaths every day. Every day. All right. And if we break this down into countries itself, Germany had 2 million deaths. Now, you don't have to remember all of this, but Germany had 2 million deaths. Russia had 1.9 million combat deaths. And I will tell you that Russia got out of the war almost a year before the war actually ended. Austria-Hungary had 1.5 million combat deaths. France had 1.4 million combat deaths. Great Britain had 900,000 combat deaths, and the war wasn't even fought on British soil. Italy had 700,000 deaths, and Italy didn't even get into the war until a year after the war began. For the United States, we had 112,000 deaths, 50,000 combat deaths, and the remainder of those deaths were largely attributed to Spanish flu. Kind of like what we're experiencing today here, my friends, here with the COVID-19. It was the same thing back in 1917, 1918 in the United States and elsewhere in the world. All right, so let's get into how the war actually began. And it's very controversial here, but most historians will believe that it was one event that triggered the war, and it was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, by being the Archduke, he is second in line to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I didn't write that for you here. The emperor of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire was Franz Joseph, 1848 to 1916. So in 1914, I think he's 86 years old. I believe that's what it is. And he will die, in 1916. He'll die less than 2 years later. But this is what the Archduke Franz Joseph looked like. And that is the emperor, not the Archduke. And the Archduke, who is his nephew, much younger than that. I'll show you a likeness of him. And not a whole lot of love lost between these two individuals, by the way, but that is the Archduke himself. There kind of has a mutton chop, or I should say, what am I trying to say? A mustache. You can look at it and determine that for yourself. And the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was scheduled for a visit to Sarajevo. I showed you on the map a few minutes ago where it is. And he was scheduled for a visit there to Sarajevo. Sarajevo is the capital city of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And it's a fun place to visit, by the way. And he was going to visit there, traveled there by train on the 28th of June in 1914. He had with him his wife. They had stopped the night before at a little resort area not too far from Sarajevo. Spent the night there, and they were scheduled to go into Sarajevo the next morning, and they were going to visit some military troops and watch the military troops training or on parade or whatever it was. And the Archduke had been warned, you don't need to go there. You don't need to go there. In fact, the Archduke had said, there may be a few Serbian bullets waiting for me when I arrive there. And so when they arrived there, and if you were in class, I would show you the maps here, the route that the Archduke actually took with his wife, Sophia. And she is not of ultra royalty. She is like middle class royalty. Their children will not be recognized as legitimate heirs to the throne. And so they arrived there, and they took the motorcade, and there were about 7 cars that were present in this motorcade. And if I remember right, I think the Archduke was in the 3rd car. And they traveled to, it was like a courthouse, where they were going to go to a breakfast. And as they were traveling along in this motorcade, they passed by an individual, and this individual threw a bomb at their car. And I really don't know what actually happened with that. Some people say that it was the Archduke himself that swatted the bomb away, which was like a hand grenade. Others will tell you that the bomb actually landed on the folded back roof. It was like a convertible. The convertible roof had been pulled back, and that the bomb actually hit that convertible roof, and it bounced off. And when it did so, the bomb went under the car that was behind the Archduke, and it blew up, and injuries were taken there, and some lives were lost. And I don't know about you good folks, but wouldn't you take that as a wake-up call that somebody's trying to kill me? Well, as it turned out, the car sped on that the Archduke was in, and actually went to where the breakfast was. It's a little town hall. It's not a little town hall. It's a large building. It's like a courthouse, like I said. And he went in, and they sat down for the breakfast, if you can imagine this. In fact, when it came time for the Archduke to speak, he stood up and he said, "You invited me to your town and welcomed me to your town, and now when I arrive here, you try to kill me." All right, so after the dinner, they got back in the car. And during those times, the cars did not have reverse gears. So if you made a bad turn, then the driver had to turn the wheel of the car and then get out of the car and literally push the car backwards, push it backwards, and get it on the proper path. Well, somebody failed to tell the driver that the course, the route had changed, and that they were going directly back to the railroad station. And instead, the driver thought that they were going to a hospital, but nobody told him about this. And so when he went back into Sarajevo, he made a turn, and the Archduke said, "No, no, 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 you're going in the wrong direction right here. Stop the car and turn the car around." And so the car came to a stop. And when the car came to a stop here, an assassin stepped up to the side of the car, and at point-blank range, 5 feet away, carrying a .380 caliber pistol and an FN model 1910 pistol, and at 5 feet away, leaned into the open car because the convertible top had been pulled back, and he fired the first shot, and the first shot hit the Sophia, the wife of the Archduke, in the abdomen, penetrated the descending abdominal aorta, and the woman was dead in a matter of a second. The second shot struck the Archduke, and it struck him in the neck right here, and he just bled to death in just a matter of seconds with that. Okay, so anyway, let me share some photographs with you. I'm going to go back here. Got a lot of these photographs for you good folks. And the individual that did this was a 19-year-old schoolboy. I'll show you what his name is. I'll let you write his name down in just a few seconds. This is what he looked like. He was a tiny, tiny guy, by the way. He had been a failure and just pushed around and had never succeeded in anything in his life. But he was a member of this group, which was called the Young Bosnian Society. He's Bosnian. He's a Bosnian Serb. And this plan was concocted, if you will. It was a conspiracy being concocted in Belgrade. Belgrade's the way you would pronounce it anyway. And for this young man, Gavrilo Princep, he just thought that this would make him a big shot. If he could kill the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and the people would finally praise him for something that he'd been a failure at and everything in life. Let's see here. This is a pistol. This is the exact pistol that was used in the assassination here. That is in a museum in Austria, by the way, today. I have not seen that actual pistol. The uniform that the Archduke was wearing at that time, this is what it looked like here. It was a brown uniform. You can actually see where they cut the uniform off of the Archduke in a feeble attempt to try to save his life there. Let's see if I can find some other photographs here. This is actually before the breakfast, this photograph was taken. Here's the Archduke, right here. He's wearing a hat. It's a funny looking hat. It's purple and green. Those are ostrich feathers, if you can imagine that. Here is the wife, Sophia. She's wearing white. She's walking beside him. This is at the train station before they got into the open car. If you look at this photograph here, this is the Archduke and Sophia leaving the breakfast hall, that town hall. And this is the car right here that they were present in. And showing you here the roof of the car that has been pulled back. That's what I was telling you a few minutes ago. Some people say that that's where the hand grenade actually hit and bounced backwards. Others say that the Archduke actually swatted it away like it was a feathercock on a badminton court, whatever the case. All right, now showing this photograph here, and let me see if I can, oops, wrong side here, and here we can see Gavrilo Princep. This Gavrilo Princep, who's been seized, if you will, by police. He made an attempt to take cyanide. The cyanide just burned his esophagus. It was old cyanide. It did not kill him, and he tried to shoot himself with a pistol that I showed you a few minutes ago, but they wrested the pistol away from him. Notice the building in the background, this building here, and that was actually, at that time, that was a restaurant. It was a breakfast hall. Let me see if I have some photograph of it here. And this is the breakfast hall. Now, where the Archduke was shot was right in this crosswalk. Right here. And where Gavrilo Princep was standing was right here on the sidewalk. He had finished his sandwich. It was a breakfast sandwich, and he finished his sandwich, and he was one of the co-conspirators, and walked out, and coincidentally, the second he walked out, the car turned right, and the car came to a stop. And so the Archduke and Sophia were right there, 5 feet away from him. You can see photographs in the windows there. This is in Sarajevo. Fun place to visit, by the way. Let me share a few other photographs with you from that time here. This is the Miljacka River that runs through Sarajevo. The river has it's fairly wide. It's about, I guess about 20 yards wide, but it's only about 6 inches deep. There's too much, I don't have enough time to tell you about all of the assassination here, conspiracy, but one of the conspirators actually dove off of the side of the wall there and dove down about 20 feet and it dove into 6 inches of water. It's a wonder it didn't kill the man, but it did not. There were 7 conspirators that were involved in this. 3 of them were given life sentences, and Gavrilo Princep here was given a 20-year sentence. He's 19 years old, member of the Young Bosnian Society, and under the laws of that time, you could not be executed until you were 21 years of age. So he was given a prison sentence of 21 years, and he lived for the next 3 years, and he died of tuberculosis. Here's a photograph here going over the Miljacka River, and if you look in the background here, if you look in the background right here, this is the restaurant I was telling you about a second ago. Right here below my fingertip is where the car was, where the Archduke and his wife Sophia were shot. Oh, I just happened to see, look at the minaret in the background there, folks. The little rocket ship, the minaret that's present there. Okay, and let's see what else we have here. Yeah, the restaurant I mentioned here where the assassination took place is a museum today. Down below here you can see this is one of the hand grenades, inert hand grenade, but that's the bomb that was used here. These are replicas of the FN 1910 pistol here, that .380 caliber pistol. These are not the exact ones that Gavrilo Princep used. And a little side note here, Gavrilo Princep was sentenced for a 20-year sentence, and where he was taken was a place which is called Lidermice. It's in the Czech Republic today. It's Czechoslovakia shortly after the war, but it's Lidermice today. And this happened to be, in World War II, was a concentration camp for the SS, for the Nazis and the SS. And he was placed in cell number 1, and that's where he would contract TB, and he would die. He would die in that area there. And it's kind of interesting. You can go inside that cell there of Gavrilo Princep, and you think, wow, this I'm standing here in the cell of the guy that actually caused World War I. All right, so let's move on here, folks. And that's Gavrilo Princep. And there's a pistol here. It's an FM model 1910, .380 caliber pistol, similar to a 9mm pistol that we would have today, for those of you that might care about that. All right, so Austria, in turn, did not do anything for 25 days. Can you imagine that? Nothing for 25 days. And then on the 23rd of November in 1914, they issued 11 demands, an ultimatum to Serbia, and this ultimatum was given. Serbia was given 48 hours to respond to it, and Serbia was not anxious for war, so Serbia just said, we'll agree to 10 of the demands, but one of the demands they did not agree to, and it had something to do with sovereignty for the Serbians, and Austria-Hungary then used that as an excuse to declare war on Serbia. All right, so watch what happens here now, friends. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, that was on the 28th of July in 1914. Well, Russia was bound by treaty to come to the assistance of Serbia. So when Russia came to the assistance of Serbia, they declared war on Austria-Hungary and also on Germany. Watch what happens. When Germany had war declared on it, Germany in turn declared war on France, who was an ally of Russia. That was a part of the Triple Entente. England, on the other hand, was bound by a treaty. To come to the assistance of France, so England declared war on Germany and Austro-Hungary. Well, if that wasn't enough, we'll find that Montenegro and Romania will jump in on the side of England and France and Russia and Serbia, and we'll find that the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria will jump in on the side of Austria-Hungary and Germany. So what do we have on our hands here, folks? We have on our hands a world war. And oddly enough, Italy, the Netherlands, and the United States, and Luxembourg, and Switzerland all remain neutral. So the United States remains neutral, but Woodrow Wilson promises all Americans cannot promise that all Americans will remain neutral. All right, so let's go back to the map here and see what we have behind us here. You can break this down here, folks. You can see in green, these are the countries that are going to ally with the Allies, and in pink, or whatever color that is, those are the countries that are going to ally with Austria-Hungary and Germany. And those countries here that are in yellow, those are the neutral countries, such as Scandinavian countries, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Albania, and in Switzerland, and in the United States. So let's move on, and we'll also see that, let's go back to the camera here, that some of these countries, particularly Great Britain and the United States, I'm tired of that chair squeaking, I will oil that anyway, will take great measures here to undergo propaganda. And the German is always made to look like a mad beast, such as what you're seeing right here. Destroy this mad brute. He's always made to look like he's King Kong. You can see the culture bludgeon, the bat that's present right there. And if you ever look at the propaganda photos from this period of time, you'll always see that the German Hun, that's with a pickle helmet right there, the German Hun is always holding a woman in his clutches there, just like King Kong. It's just like King Kong. And for many in Great Britain, and in Great Britain and the United States, they felt like that, particularly in the United States, that America was providing military support to France and Great Britain, and they actually should be providing it to Germany. I'm talking about Irish Americans, German Americans, but nonetheless a wave of anti-Germanism spread across the United States here, folks. How many of you good folks like hamburgers? All you folks like hamburgers? Well, a hamburger, which is named for Hamburg, Germany, we're going to change the name, and it's going to now be recognized as a Liberty sandwich. Any of you folks like hot dogs? You like Frankfurters? Frankfurt, Germany? No. Liberty sausage. That is a new name for it. Salisbury steak? Nope. New name. Liberty steak. Any of you like sauerkraut? Nope. Liberty cabbage? That is what it is known as here henceforth. Any of you good folks have a German Shepherd? Nope. New name for it, Alsatian Shepherd. I'm not making that up, my friends here. East Berlin was changed to Pershing Berlin. East Germantown, Indiana was changed to Pershing, Indiana here. Berlin, Iowa was changed to Lincoln, Iowa. Kaiser Street was changed to Main Street. It was all just in a wave of anti-Germanism. Okay, so back we go here, folks. All right, so let's move right along here. Now, for the Germans, the plan that they developed to invade France was the Schlieffen Plan. And I'll try to just dictate this to you. Germany would be on the western side, and we would have Austria-Hungary fighting on the eastern side. So the plan was for Austria-Hungary to hold Russia in check, keep Russia in check. Then Germany would invade France by first invading through Belgium. This was called the Schlieffen Plan, and then defeat France. And then once France was defeated, then Germany would turn its forces to the east and would join with Austria-Hungary and defeat Russia. That was the plan here. But what Germany had not counted on was Great Britain joining the war. And that changed it. But nonetheless, we'll find that Germany, with the Schlieffen Plan, will be very, very successful. And they will push the French lines here all the way back, almost into Paris, to about 50 miles away from Paris, 30 miles away from Paris, before the French actually rallied, and they pushed the Germans back to the Aisne River. A-I-S-N-E is the way it is spelled. And I've tried to demonstrate here for you how the Schlieffen Plan actually worked here. Instead of invading directly into France, they would first go up here into Belgium and then circle around behind. Amazingly, they would use the same plan in World War II. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see what else I have here for you. All right, so I want to share a few things. I think I'm pretty much out of my slides here, but I want to share some things with you about what did take place in World War I. And for the Germans developed. I didn't write it out for you here, but the Germans developed a item that would kind of equalize things on the high seas. And did I not write that out for you here? I didn't see it here, and apparently I did not do that. And what this is, it's a device which is known as a Unterseeboot. An Unterseeboot. I'm looking through my slides here, and I do not see that, so apparently I didn't write that out for you. It must be on the next lecture. But just imagine the word here, Unterseeboot. Unterseeboot. Under the seaboat, this is called a submarine. A submarine, or commonly it was just referred to as a U-boat. And these U-boats were terrors on the high seas. Stay under the water, launch their torpedoes, and would sink so many of these British and Allied ships here, to include later American ships with that. I think I have an article over here that deals with this. Here it is right here. It's called Killer U-Boats. These killer U-boats, which are these Unterseeboots, Das Unterseeboot. But an event took place on the 5th of May in 1915, and let me go back here to this. And this was a sinking of an unarmed British passenger liner, and this ship, which was known as the Lusitania. I can't make my photograph go back any further. And it tells you right here that 1,300 die as the Lusitania goes to the bottom. It was actually 1,398 that died. And we had about 123 Americans that actually went down with the ship itself. This is known as the Lusitania. It is a Cunard-class ship. It is not a White Star-class ship. I'll share another likeness here, and I'll spend a few minutes with this. And here we have another. It's not a sister ship because this is a White Star ship, but another ship. If I can get this position right here, and this ship, which was sunk on April the 16th in 1912. Anybody like to give me the title of this ship? Here, I can't get that position right here. It tells you 1,500 lives were lost. This one is known as a Titanic. All right, so let me share a couple of photographs with you as I knock my camera all over the place here. And all of these photographs here are going to be associated with the Lusitania. The Lusitania, by the way, the Lusitania was off the coast of Ireland. It was right next to what we call Cork today. It was 11 miles off the coast of Ireland. It had sailed from New York. It was just a matter of hours before it would dock in Liverpool, and it was sunk by Unterseeboot Swansea, U-boat number 20 here. And today, if you go to this city here, which is called Cove, at that time it was called Queenstown, but here you'll see a memorial here that it commemorates those that died and those that were saved here also, and this is present here in Cove from the Lusitania. Over where this area is here, down below there's an interesting little pub there, which is called Rob Roy. And many of those that drowned were carried into the Rob Roy and were laid to rest there overnight before proper burials could take place. That is a pub today. It's kind of interesting if you go into the Rob Roy and have a glass of Guinness or 2 or 3 or whatever you want there, and you just reflect on this and think, well, wow, all the dead, or many of the dead from Lusitania were taken here. Okay, here's likeness here of the Titanic, 1912. Yeah, here's another likeness here of the Titanic. This is the White Star Line. The ships of the White Star are not near as fast as that of the Cunard class ships here. And here's another advertisement there for White Star from Cherbourg to New York. And this is the terminal that is present there. It is a museum today that is dedicated mostly to the Titanic. Now, before the Titanic left Belfast, Ireland, that's in Northern Ireland, and stopped here at Cove. And this was the last point that the Titanic would take on passengers and start sailing across the Atlantic, and that's where it would hit the iceberg with that. And that is a museum today, dedicated to the Titanic. This is the pier. This was a pier. This is the remains of it from 1912, actually, to this very day. As a matter of fact, it's non-usable, of course, but that was the exact pier that was used for the passengers that boarded out of Cove, or out of Queenstown at that time, and got on the Titanic for its fatal voyage here. If you go further north and go up into Belfast itself, monument here, this is where the Titanic departed from, and that's a monument there that is a memorial to those that died, on the Titanic itself. Okay, so let's move right along here, folks, and I got a number of visuals here for World War I. This was total war. This was total war. We'd never seen war like this before. Let me try to show you a few photographs here. And this was war which was fought with this type of armament. You know what you're looking at right here. This is tank warfare. Tanks were first introduced in 1916. It was the British that brought them out. Looks nothing like our Abrams tank today, nothing like our tanks today. Lightly armored, had machine guns, did not really have a forward gun on it here. And let's see what else we have. This is what made the casualties of World War I so dramatic. We had a machine gun. This is a German crew. Notice there the pickle helmet that they have. I had to tell you this on myself. When I was about 8, 9 years of age, my dad gave me one of these German Kaiser Bill helmets, pickle helmet. And I'm telling you folks right now, you couldn't pull it off my head with the jaws of life. I literally slept with that helmet on. All right, on we go with some other photography of that period of time. Heavy artillery. This is not heavy artillery, but this is a field artillery, an American unit here wearing a type of helmet. And I have one in my office here, but I should have brought it out and showed it to you, but maybe I'll do that next time around here. This is total warfare, air, sea, land. Here we have the HMS Invincible, British ship. It's a dreadnought, been blown out of the water, if you will, here, folks, by German dreadnoughts likewise. War in the skies here. You can see the biplane. You had monoplanes with one wing. You had biplanes with 2 wings. Triplanes with 3 wings. This is a British aircraft. I can't identify that aircraft. I need to spend some time with it. Over on the eastern front, the Russian front, you had very little trench warfare. These are German soldiers here. You can see the hobnail boots that they have, fighting out in the open. Over on the western front is where you had the trench warfare. These are French soldiers, by the way. Had to be a staged photograph. You don't get your head above the parapet line. If you do, you're a dead man. Let's see what else we have here. Trench warfare, you can dissect this. Look around here for a few seconds here, and you can see one sentry. He will not get his head above that parapet line. If you do, you'll be a dead man. I don't know if any of you folks have read this book before, and this book, which is called All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Remarque. Great book. Tells you all about World War I from the infantryman, German infantryman's perspective there. Interesting book. A couple of good movies out with this. Go down the trench itself, and if you take a few seconds there, you see sleeping soldiers. You can imagine the bottom of the trench, this is going to be nothing but mud or dust at the bottom, probably mud. Gives us a lot of cases of trench foot. If you want to have a dry place to stay, just excavate out into the side of the trench. Here comes a mortar round, here comes an artillery round, and you just dug your own grave here. I picked up this photograph not long ago. This is a reconstructed World War I trench. This is up at Pell Mell, Tennessee, by the way, but that's what the trenches actually look like. I recommend to you folks, if a movie came out last year, which is called 1917. I like that movie very, very much, but it kind of gives you an idea of the way war was in 1917. This is called Going Over the Top In World War I, this was a cult of the offensive here, folks. And you would know that an attack was imminent here. Your officers would tell you, clean your weapons, load your ammunition, get ready for the whistle, and you would go over the top. You'd literally run down the trench line here, the barbed wire where those two soldiers are climbing over the parapet wall there. The barbed wire will be pulled back, and your objective is to charge face-to-face into the enemy 500 yards away, going through no man's land. There's no cover and concealment there. This is what no man's land would look like. All the trees have been stripped away from the millions of artillery rounds that would be fired into that area. No cover and concealment. If you were fortunate enough to take over the enemy's position, get yourself ready here, folks. Within 5 minutes, there'll be a counterattack, and that counterattack will push you back to your original trenches. Get yourself ready for it. In another 5 minutes, we'll have a counterattack that will push the enemy back to their trenches, whatever. Play that little game back and forth here. All right, these are American fighting men. This is in the latter parts of the war, 1917, and the Meuse-Argonne offensive. At a later time, I'll write that word out for you. Meuse-Argonne offensive lasted from September the 26th until November the 11th in 1918. Okay, and here we have some British soldiers here. Notice the tank in the background, the tank. It came out in 1916. It just frightened the devil out of the Germans, and the Germans just literally got out of their trenches and ran away. And they realized, after they'd gone about a mile or so, that there's no reason to run because you're outrunning the tanks right there. Tanks could be easily defeated, as you can see right here. They just go nose down into a trench here. Don't bother with that here. Just bring up the record, and you'll pull the records out. Can you notice machine guns that are on the sides of the tank? All right, so trench warfare. And here we can see, ironically, let's look at this now. We have, how many people in that photograph here? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 on the litter, so that's 8 individuals. But I want you to think about this for a second, as morbid as this may be. If you shoot an enemy soldier and you kill the enemy soldier, how many is taken out of action? 1 soldier. If you wound an enemy soldier, well, take a look at it. How many soldiers are taken out of action? Well, in this case, 8 soldiers. So, better to kill the enemy or better to wound the enemy? Better to wound the enemy, as you obviously can see with that. Okay, here we have a German soldier here. Often we'll find that quick burials, you throw a few inches of earth over the individual, rains come down, washes the earth away, and we get these grotesque, macabre appearances such as what you're seeing right there. All right. We also see dirigibles, and these dirigibles, which could be used to fly escorts over destroyer convoys, and you can actually see the silhouette of a U-boat down below, direct the destroyers to go over the U-boat, drop depth charges on it, and hopefully you can take out that U-boat. Use kind of effectively with that. Here are British soldiers here at an aerodrome preparing to take off on flight. Empty your pockets before going on patrol. You don't ever want to get caught with secrets in your pockets there, so empty your pockets. And on we go. And at first for these aviators from all sides, they would literally fly by each other and they would just wave, literally just wave, such as that, friendly. And then somebody thought, well, he's actually a German pilot. Let me take my service pistol out and I'll shoot at him as I pass by. And then somebody said, well, why don't we just take the observer in the back and to observe for the enemy location lines, and we'll let the observer take a rifle or a shotgun and shoot at the pilot. And then somebody said, well, why don't we take a machine gun, mount the machine gun? And at first they put the machine gun on the fuselage in front of the pilot, but we kept shooting the propellant into. That's not good. That's a good way to go into a tailspin or whatever and go straight down. And then they came up with the idea, well, let's take the machine gun and put the machine gun on the top wing. The only problem with that, for the pilot to fly it, you have to stand in the cockpit and put the joystick between your legs, and you have to fire the machine gun. That's not very good. And then somebody said, well, let's take the twin Lewis guns here, and we'll put the machine gun back where the observer can fire the machine gun at the enemy. Well, the only problem with that, you got to have the enemy behind you. That creates a lot of problems, but leave it up to the Germans, and the Germans developed the interrupter gear so that you could place a machine gun on the front of the aircraft, and it would literally shoot between the blades, and when the air propeller would spin, it would literally shoot between the wash, between the propeller blades as they were spinning with that. And that changed warfare enormously with the interrupter gear. I'll share a couple of things with you here, folks. when I was a kid, I read everything I could find on World War I aviators here. If you went into my bedroom at night, I had all these model kits, all these Spads and Fokker D7s, and just every type of World War I aircraft you could think of, which was hanging from kite string or hanging from fishing line in my room. And I was just so caught up with this. This is a book that dates back to the time of my childhood. I was about 11, 12, 13 years old. Read every page in this dozens of times. The Flying Aces. And, of course, the number one pilot that fascinated me was a German pilot, Baron von Richthofen, the Red Baron. And I read this book likewise dozens of times here. If you enter into my office right now here, my friends, I have 2 photographs of the Red Baron that's right here in my office here. I had such great admiration for him. Won the Blue Max. He is credited with shooting down more planes than anybody else. He's a German, by the way. In World War I, he had 80 credited kills. A lot of good documentaries out there on the Red Baron. Eddie Rickenbacker happened to be another person I was fascinated with, but he is a pilot from the United States who fought in France. Showing you a British aircraft, a person over to this far end right here that I'm actually tapping. That's the King of England. That is George V. All right, let's see what else we have. Other photographs here. I can get this stabilized here. Just a typical flight over an aerodrome in France. Other photographs here. British soldiers with some place in Flanders Fields. Anyway, more British soldiers that are present here over in Flanders Field. All right, now this is a war. It's total warfare. Here, folks, land, sea, air. We saw all sorts of interesting weapons to come out of this period of time here, to include machine guns. We had flamethrowers, such as what you're seeing right here. The Flammenwerfer here. This is a German one, by the way. Some of the other weapons of war that we had. This was a time of barbed wire. It was a time of poison gas. Poison gas first came out in 1915. Here's a you can actually buy these. You can get these on eBay if you wish to do so. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife here. Here's a British Tommy here with one of the Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife in his teeth, clenched within his teeth there. All right, so anyway, many types of weapons. Here's another one here that clipped out of a magazine. This is a German weapon, heavy artillery. It's called Big Bertha, by the way, Big Bertha, and it would fire a shot 50 miles. Not very accurate, as you probably can imagine with that, but it sure as heck would scare individuals in Paris, when the artillery shells were raining in on them. All right, let's see what else I might have over here for you good folks here. Here's an article. I'm just leaning over. I'm surrounded by this maze of material, going back to the Red Baron. The Band of Brothers with the flying circus, so to speak. Yeah, showing you some of the triplanes. Red Baron flew a triplane for a period of time. Here's a likeness of the Red Baron. Here, in fact, the bottom photograph is one I have in my office there, but it's like a 10 by 12 photograph of that. All right, let's see what else I might have left out here, my friend. And I guess that's probably a pretty good stopping place for today. I'm out of my visuals right here. And we still have much more to talk about with World War I. I've got to talk to you. When we come back after your examination here, we'll pick up our first engagement, which is the engagement, the siege or campaign that took place at Verdun. I'll show you how to properly spell that at a later time to alleviate the pressure at Verdun. We'll have another engagement that takes place at the Somme. And eventually the United States, we're going to get involved in this war with the Declaration of War on Germany on April 6, 1917. But first we have to build an army. For the American Army, we only have 120,000 in the active service and 80,000 National Guardsmen. So we have to build an army, and for America, we are going to build an army of 5 million. And it's going to tip the balance here, my friends, in favor of the Allies. So let's stop for the time being. You have a review, which is coming up. That review, which will take place, it will last about, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 minutes, something like that. And so that will follow this lecture. It will be on a different video, however. All right, thank you very much.